Funniest story. I actually was listening to some of the podcasts last night, and in particular, I listened to Jeff Miller's. I think Jeff was on a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the ring toss or the ring throw in the UK, and it took me back to my first time in the US now, some 25 years ago, 24, 25 years ago, and I was coming to be the HR business leader for a trade show business, Reed Exhibitions, and I was given some training on sort of things to be aware of and things to think about. Because it's interesting when you're coming to a new country, particularly in an HR role, you're having to really think very cautiously about how you interact. And I'd heard lots of horror stories, so I got a half day sort of cultural assimilation and legal training. And I was really good for the first sort of couple of months, and then I got a little bit confident. And I remember walking down the corridor one evening, and it was like 7:30 at night, and most people had gone home. And I heard, and in fact, it was my assistant, I heard her coughing like really badly. And as I walked down the corridor, I said, you should give up the fags. And then I thought to myself, oh no, what have I done? And I sort of buried my head in my hands as I continued walking. And for those listening who don't know, um, in the UK, fags are cigarettes, and clearly in the US, it has a far more derogatory term. And I kind of walked back and poked my head round the cubicle corner, and she was in fits of laughter. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And she goes, it's all right. It's okay. I get it. I get it. But it was one of those moments when I realized that it's super easy to get overconfident and let your barrier down and let your controls down and get caught out. So luckily it was in the right situation for it to happen. So but that's my biggest mistake.
Well, in terms of trajectory of mistakes, not so bad, I have to say. We've heard truly horrifying, like the stuff of nightmares. That is one of those things where it's like, if your audience is okay, everything's okay, and no one's going to call HR on HR. So I think you were good in that case. In that sense.
Exactly.
Hello and welcome to Skilled.
The podcast where we speak with remarkable L&D and HR leaders to hear the stories behind the strategies and skills that drive measurable success. I'm Karen Rosenfeld here with Omer Glass, GrowthSpace's CEO. Today's guest is Robert Rigby-Hall. Robert has over 25 years of global experience in human resources and general management, working across the US, UK, Europe, and Asia, and he's currently the Chief People Officer at Orvian Global and has held leadership roles at companies like Rouge 5 Inc., NXP Semiconductors, and LexisNexis. So hello and welcome, Robert. And I have to say, I love your name. It just rolls off the tongue in such an elegant manner, very British. It's just fun to, do people just say that a lot? Like Americans probably like Robert Rigby-Hall, hello.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I won't launch into another funny story, but I do remember an elevator ride once where someone said to me, "I love your accent," and I said, "Well, I don't have one, but you do." And you could see the thought, you could almost hear the thought wheels turning in this person's head. And luckily, I think we're like on the 15th floor, so the elevator doors opened and I was able to leave graciously, whilst I think they continued thinking about the confusion.
The
Anyway, nice
British
to be here,
humor
Karen.
is lost on a lot of Americans too. So, there's that. Well, so why don't we get started? Generally speaking, I love to ask, why don't you walk us through a success story, something that, looking back on your career, something that you're really proud of, something that you really hang your hat on after all these years, something that really made an impact. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to when I was the CHRO at NXP Semiconductors. NXP, about 27,000 employees, about 7 billion in revenue. Of the 27,000 employees, we had a lot of operators who were doing wafer fabrication for semiconductors and also storing of wafers and constructing the actual semiconductors, and about 3,500 engineers, so a big sort of R&D and technical population. And these semiconductors go into phones, computers, mobile transactions, lighting products, anything that we use day in, day out. And we really wanted to move the needle on engagement. Engagement had been something we'd started to focus on, but we really wanted to make significant improvement. Um, and over 4 years, we achieved it. And I'd like to share a little bit about how that was. Um, we moved in that 4 years the stock price from $16 to over 110. And I can't claim all of that was due to engagement. I think part of that was the product line and innovation we built. But we went from the 17th to the 75th percentile on Gallup's engagement survey, which was a significantly sort of above average improvement. And we took our net promoter score, which for people who understand that is how much you would really recommend and promote a product. We moved our net promoter score from 5 to 40. And if you think about the service profit chain model, which I don't hear people talk about very much now, but if you think about that, it's very much if you have employees who are passionate about the company, about the products, and that kind of flows through to the consumer. So to drive engagement, we took sort of a multi-pronged approach. We built engagement into our performance management system, as you'd expect. We built it very strongly into succession reviews. So we expected when we did a succession review and we were looking at leaders in the business, we looked at the normal things you'd expect, their past performance reviews, but we also looked at their ability to deliver against budget. We looked at how they're done in terms of their net promoter score. And we looked at their engagement scores, both for their direct reports and for the broader organization that they ran. And I do remember the first time we actually didn't promote somebody based on their engagement scores. That message went through the organization like wildfire. And suddenly I had lots of leaders coming to me saying, so what do I need to do to get my engagement scores to go up? So succession reviews and succession planning. The third one was we built our e-learning around engagement. So rather than saying, oh, I want to improve my communication skills, and you would go in and have various modules on communication skills, we actually built it around each one of the engagement factors. So you could say, okay, the question 12 on the Gallup survey is X. Therefore, if I go into our learning management system, I can see everything I could do to improve that. So it was really just about reorienting how you went into the LMS. The fourth thing we did was engagement coaches. So we actually took our top quartile performers on an engagement basis and asked them if they'd like to be engagement coaches, entirely voluntary. And then we trained them with some basic coaching skills, and we paired them against people with okay engagement scores, not bad, just okay, on the basis that we could get the biggest lift by working on the sort of okay and good group versus really having to work on the sort of bad engagement group. And that was fascinating because we got significant improvement. In fact, those individuals who had gone through coaching by a peer in engagement got a 5 times lift on engagement scores, which is really significant. What was amazing was the engagement coaches actually also got an engagement lift. And they loved it because now they were being seen as leaders in this area. And it made them feel really good. I thought going into it that they would see it as just more work, but actually far from it. They really loved it. But the biggest impact thing we did was an executive development program. And it was a program that we'd seen run externally, but never run in-house anywhere at any company. And we worked with them to produce the program on an in-house basis. And it was 4 expert facilitated sessions over a 7-month period of time. The real work was sort of around getting people to practice leadership skills in real time. They all had personalized learning programs based on 360 feedback. We delivered it regionally around the globe. So we ran a session in Asia, a session in the US, a couple in Europe. Um, 12 participants in each session. And there was emphasis on sort of personal development, on building cross NXP skills, um, and building a general management perspective to what people, how people thought about things. And each session was structured around a real-time business case. So they would bring a business issue to talk about and actually discuss it and get peer input to their thoughts around how they were going to solve it. Then there was individual coaching in each one of the sessions as well. And then there was leadership skills practice going on in each session. And as you'd expect from any good L&D initiative, we really wanted to see what the impact was. So we tried to measure it. And, we all do the sort of happy sheets, which is the sort of easy one to do. And of course, people loved it, got a lot out of it. I think there was 92% of participants felt that they'd made an improvement around their ability to drive engagement as a result. And we did 360 feedback, sort of post-manager view about the employee as well. But the biggest thing was we looked at what happened to engagement scores for those who went through the program compared to those who didn't. And we got a 4 times greater lift in engagement scores for those who went through the program. So for me, it was it really proved out that it was super successful. So why did it work? I think it was, in part the overall focus that we had on engagement, which was CEO down. We had a very competitive executive team who also wanted to make sure that they got the greatest lift in their engagement scores. So I think all those things help. But I think the main reasons that this particular leadership development program worked was because it was, we were holding sessions over multiple months. So it was sustained. You were building things in. It was very much practice versus theory. So there were no great sort of hours spent on models. This was, here's a quick model. Now let's actually put it into practice. The sessions were highly collaborative, and they really did prove to be a safe space for people to talk as well. I think having a cross-functional group together really was successful as well. And each program, the content we customized based on the 360s of the participants. So if one particular program, everybody had come out really highly on communication skills, and we dropped the communications element and we refocused on something else. I have to say, we also ran the program for a couple of intact teams, particularly teams who were going through some real challenges in their business. And it worked equally well for them. So I'm not sure how much the sort of having intact versus cross-functional, cross-business unit teams made a difference. But it was a hugely successful program for NXP, and really part of what I think drove that share price increase. And one of the things I'm probably proudest is, NXP for me was, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago. They're still running the program now. So there you go.
Wow. No, I think I have some comments or my summary or my 2 cents, because I think you got into really smart things there, between the lines, and then a follow-up question about the executive program. So what I really liked about the way you described it is from the beginning you understood what you want to impact. You made it enforceable. So there is one thing to say we care about engagement, another thing is to actually compensate people on engagement or to promote people on engagement. So you actually make it real for people. So it's not just something you say, it's something you do. And then you broke it down to the elements, and not only the skills that drive engagement, but also you broke like the cohorts, and you segmented the population to the mid engagers, like the bottom engagers, and so forth. And then the thing I liked the most probably from what you said was the internal mentoring program or the peer-to-peer program of like the engagement people that you trained. And then I think the reason why it worked for you, and a disclosure, in most companies, mentoring programs fail. I even wrote a Forbes article on that, is because you're not intentional, because the people are not experts in something, and because you don't understand what happens in the programs. And here you basically got everything. You found people who can really teach engagement because they're good, and you actually help them with the skills. You match them to people who actually need it, and then the engagement was about something very specific you want, like to come out of the mentoring, right? It's not only, hey, meet together and then see what happens, because nothing happens. It fades away.
Right,
And here it
right.
was intentional about development, about something they cared about. So I think it's brilliant. Basically, you got a lot of concepts that most companies go wrong about, and you really got it right. So I love it. Like the way from the beginning about how specific you were with engagement, to how you broke it down, to how you executed on that. And then basically what was a full cycle. So kudos for that. It's very
Yeah,
impressive.
it's. I think it's really important to come at any topic from as many different angles as you can, and certainly something like engagement, which is, it's all encompassing. So to be able to build it sustainably into things, so rather than just do, one piece of management development around it, to build it in and really hold people accountable and make it, this is serious. We care about your engagement scores for your directs and for your whole team. Um, and one thing I didn't mention is we also put a lot of emphasis around communication. So we had an interesting communication strategy, not around the run up to engagement, because you're always going to do that, where you're taking a moment to remind people about all the great things you did that you said you were going to do around engagement, because then it's in their minds when they do the next survey. But we actually ran a communications program over a period of time where we took a picture of the manager, and then we took a picture of the manager with the team, and we'd run a double-ended campaign. So we would say, hey, this is X, and these are the things they've done for their team to build engagement. And then we would run the picture with the team and say, this is the team, and these are all the things the team has experienced as a result of the leader's change in engagement approach. So it was a little sort of graphic. It wasn't even a video, but it was, we pushed them out the two sides of the coin. And it was really good at reminding people of, the impact that it has on the team and teamwork.
So now a question for you. In order to do such like kind of like a fundamental exercise across the whole company in like getting engagement into how will people get promoted, probably compensated, to do a very comprehensive program and all around engagement, you needed executive buy, like the management buy, right? You cannot do it on your own. And I understand that you kind of like you try to prove a correlation between engagement and performance, but you can always claim for other confounding variables or other things that cause that, better economy, whatever, right? So how did you get the buy that basically convince everyone that this is what the company needs to focus on? Because without focus, you cannot achieve anything. So it's a choice, like focus. So how did you get that in the beginning?
Yeah, I think there are a few things that came together. Um, there were a couple of members of the executive team who really had a deep-seated belief in it, and felt that it could have a significant impact. And I completely agree. You can try and correlate a whole set of data to prove it out. And we did just that, but there's also plenty of other things. The stock market was on a rise, so that probably accounted for X dollars in our growth. We had some fantastic products that we launched into customers such as Apple. They were riding a wave up. So there's lots of other reasons. Um, but those couple of sponsors were really good at sort of getting alignment with the CEO. And then I spent a lot of time setting the management team, the executive team up with what they needed to be communicating. So I'm not expecting the CEO to be writing all of these things and being out there communicating it, but I am expecting him to present a slide on engagement at each one of the town halls where it feels to the organization that he owns it and he's passionate about it. And it's not that he wasn't owning it, but he's got a lot of things to think about, but it's about giving him the script to communicate it. And within the executive team, we created a sense of competitiveness in people wanting their engagement scores to be up. Now, there's a bit of a double-edged sword to that one. It doesn't always go as you want. And then you start saying, well, people trying to manipulate this just so that they can get higher scores. But overall, there was a sense of competitiveness and a sense that people understood that really, if we could create this as a great place to work, not in terms of the branded great place to work, but truly somewhere where people really wanted to be, then that was going to have a material impact on how we performed. And like anything, this was an organization and still is an organization with a lot of engineers, a lot of technical people. And if you can't measure it, then it's pretty valueless in their mind. Not just the 3,500 sort of PhD engineers, but also the executive team. And so having it tied to using Gallup so we could really look at it every year, and they would tear apart the detail and they'd want to go into the minutiae of, left-handed widget making people that they had in different. And I spent my time trying to pull them out of that and get directional data. But at the end of the day, being able to have concrete data that there's no debate was really helpful in
Can I ask,
helping them
over how
drive
long a
engagement
period
as
of
well.
time were you building out these programs and then testing them? Because you did say you sort of A/B tested to see who was performing better. I'm curious to see how long of a trajectory all of this was.
So we had on the leadership development program, we tracked 3 years worth of data. So it definitely, it was definitely a trend line that was there. I'm sure now they probably have, 10 years worth of data, hopefully showing the same thing. As I said, they're still running the same program.
Amazing. I think there's no better like question when you know you've done something well and it's if it's still running, like you did a good job. That's so congratulations on that. Why don't we take this to a darker place on something where maybe you kind of missed the mark, maybe programs that were mixed pretty quickly because they didn't work, or anything that you sort of spearheaded where the outcomes weren't what you expected, and then let's focus on what you learned from that.
Well, I'm sure that there's plenty of programs that I've had that have not run as expected or have failed. But maybe I'm going to go to a slightly different place, which maybe is a little unusual. But I'm lucky, and I'll tie this into your follow-up question, but luck is an interesting one. My father used to say, you make your own luck, and I never really understood what that meant. Um, so when I say I've been lucky, I guess I kind of mean I've been fortunate um, in that I've been able to step into some general management roles as well as HR roles. And in 2015, I decided to step away altogether from HR and the corporate world and do something completely different. And I launched, along with a couple of business partners, my own business that was in the financial services space, supporting American expats. Those are a unique, and I was one at the time because I was living in the Netherlands at the time. And it's a group who are kind of persona non grata from a bank and financial institution perspective. Things like the Patriot Act, FATCA, which is the Foreign and American Tax Compliance Act, have had very significant impacts. And basically, banks outside the US do not want to touch American expats. They'll let you have a cash bank account, but no investing, nothing like that. And so we decided to target that group of people um, and provide financial planning and advice for that group. Um, And we built a reasonably successful business. I sold my share of it to my business partners in the end. But one issue was trying to find products for American expats to invest in. And it's as you may know, it's not just the impact of where do they want to invest their foreign earned money, but they also can't buy new mutual funds if they're living outside the US either. So there's restrictions in terms of what they can do in the US. And we created from scratch and launched a product called Universal Access Bonds. Um, Phenomenally clever product based out of Ireland, um, really unique, but extremely complicated to communicate. And, when I think about it, it was kind of like if Henry Ford had skipped the whole motor car and had gone straight to an aeroplane and was trying to convince the people with buggy and horse and carriages to buy aeroplanes, they would have said, but I just really want to stay on the ground and move from A to B. I don't need to fly anywhere. And so for us, it was just incredibly complicated. And there's so much mistrust in the financial community. You take those two things, and it was remarkably difficult to communicate this product and therefore to sell it. Um, and so the lesson for me was no matter how good the product or how good the solution is to the problem you've got, and if you think about that in the corporate life, it's the same. I can have a great solution for culture, for engagement, for performance management, whatever it is. But if you can't communicate it and you can't sell it, it's absolutely useless. And so that kind of, maybe it took me way too long in my life to learn that. And I started in sales. I started my career in selling salary surveys and compensation surveys. But that was my lesson really was if it's too complicated, you can't communicate it, you can't sell it, you're a losing place to start with.
To add on top of that, and I 100% agree, I would even take it internally into the culture. Like usually when I work with people, if they don't manage to explain what they want in like 1 minute in very, very simple words, like the 5-year-old rule, then they didn't think it through, right? And then it's okay to do a brainstorming call, but if it's an actual like decision-making call, like you need to basically digest it or simplify or do not mention it, and it makes everyone's life easier because things need to be simple, clear, whether it's yeah, if it's a product or a program or just kind of like a one-on-one. So I like it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more.
I like it.
Couldn't agree more.
Keep it simple. The KISS method always works, no matter what. So looking back, what
True.
advice would you give to yourself? I mean, other than maybe stay the course in HR, don't know. But what advice would you give to yourself when you were first starting out as a chief people officer? What skills would you have told yourself to focus on when you were sort of first starting out?
Yeah, I think I've been fortunate to have had a career that's been international, and I've managed to live and work in a lot of different places. And I never expected that the US would be home and the country that I've chosen to make home. I thought as an English person, I might end up working somewhere in continental Europe, but I never thought it would be the US. Um, and I think it's James Baldwin, who's a civil rights activist and writer. I think he's the one who said about traveling. I met a lot of people in Europe, and I even encountered myself. And I think there's something about sort of lifelong learning. Um, and so, if there's two things I would tell, well, I'm opting to give you two things. I would tell my younger self. The first one would be keep on learning. Now, I was not a great student at school. Um, I ended up leaving with what I think in the US is a bachelor's degree, so not even a 3 or 4 year college degree. Um, it hasn't held me back, but I do think keeping on learning and taking learning seriously, and no matter how old you are, there's nothing like learning. So that would be one. And the second one will be immediately dismissed by everybody, but it is listen to your parents. Because surprise, surprise, they do actually know something. And unfortunately, you don't realize how much they know until it's too late. And so I used to listen to my father talk about, you make your own luck. And I never really realized what he meant by that until I was probably in my mid to late 40s. And what he meant by it was you work hard, you seize opportunities, and then you outperform on each one of those opportunities. And lo and behold, other people give you more opportunities. And for me, I didn't realize that, and maybe somewhere subconsciously it was in my brain, but I don't think I could have articulated it when the HR director first walked into my office in my, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s, and said, "We want you to go to the US and lead HR there." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." Um, but since then, I've had lots of opportunities where people have asked me to do things, and I've said, "Yeah, I'll move to Singapore and go run that business," or "I'll move back to the US and go run that business or do this." And it's proved to be a very um, fruitful, from a growth perspective, of seeing the world, and I think becoming a different person, having seized those opportunities to do things. So that would be my advice to my younger self: keep on learning, maybe take learning academically to start with more seriously, but keep on learning and seize those opportunities and make your own luck. Listen to your
Oh, I
parents.
love ending that. That was pure poetry. Thank you so much. And I don't know, I can't speak for Omar, but definitely as the mom to young children, I find myself appreciating my parents more and more when I discipline them or I'm trying to explain the world to them. I'm like, huh, they were right about that. And then you find yourself repeating the things that you've learned and you've repeated from your family. So I think that's wonderful advice. And I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us and share your wisdom and your insights with our listeners. It was a pleasure.
Karen, thank you very much for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.